Hi, welcome. This is the Virginia School of Traditional Arts, and today we're going to show you how to turn an old handsaw like this one to a fillet knife like this one. So stay tuned and we'll get started. I'll show y'all what I had started with today. I have a paper template, and I created this by going on the computer and getting a fillet knife that I liked, and I want one that has a 9-inch blade, and I enlarged the picture until I got it to be about a 9-inch blade. And then of course I take it and I trace it onto a block of wood. This is just thin plywood, and I make me a pattern because I may make more than one of these, and I have adopted some of the features on this knife, but I have changed right many of them too. I've changed how this is operating and how this end down here works. This had a hole in it. I didn't like that. So I just got this pattern basically to get me a start on how thick the blade was this direction, and how long and what kind of a curve it would have. And I curved mine even more than this one. I adjusted the handle. This handle, time I enlarged it to make the blade correct, the handle was way too big, so I adjusted the handle down. And with the wooden pattern, you can kind of feel it and see if it feels right. That's why I like using the wooden patterns. But we're going to take this old handsaw here, and we're going to lay our pattern on here and trace it out. And the reason I'm using this, normally I forge blades, but with a fillet knife you want it to be able to flex. And an old handsaw really does a good job flexing. An old handsaw really does a good job of flexing, so that's what I'm looking for, that flexible type of steel. And so that's what we're going to use. Lay it down here, and we're just going to trace it. I like using a fat Sharpie marker here to trace with. The thickness of the marker gives me a little more room. I could trace this with an awl and have a real precise line, but the fatness of my marker gives me a little room to adjust. If I get a little close, I'm not to my pattern yet. I'm actually just getting close to it. Gives you about a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Alright, so there's our pattern. And we're going to use a cutoff wheel to cut this out. I said saw, but that's not what I meant. We're going to cut that with our grinding wheel. This metal is hardened at this moment, and so if you try to cut it on a bandsaw or what have you, it's just going to tear your teeth off your bandsaw. You're not going to get anywhere. Of course, use your protective gear when you're doing this kind of work. Well, here's what we've got cut out. We're a little far off some of these curve lines. I can't, when you got a straight cutting disc, it's hard to get too close to those curved lines without taking lots of little nibbles. Which, if I'm gonna do that, I'll just go ahead and put it on our belt grinder and just knock that out. I'm probably going to cut this little piece here just a little bit to save me a little work and probably not nip us off, but we're pretty much there to go to the grinder at this point, finish up our profile. And our knife is, as advertised, very flexible, and that's what we were looking for. With using our grinder, this thing does not get really hot. It gets warm, but it doesn't get like crazy hot. And as you can see on my board here, the grinder, if you have to, you can cut right into the board. I kept it on the big saw for as long as I could, so we had something to clamp it down to. And I was just clamping the board and this and to the table. So keep your work clamped down. This is raggedy, so be careful on that part. But we're gonna just trim this on up here, this little corner here, and put it on our grinder. Here's our rough profile, and I generally stop at this point. I haven't finished these corners the way I would like to yet. I'm gonna take the burrs off where we've ground it, and I'm gonna sit and hold it for a while. That's what I do. I want to get that handle to where it feels right, and so I'll knock these little bit of burrs off, and then I'll just go and hold it for a little while and just figure out if I like that handle shape or if it needs to be smaller. Right now it's feeling plenty big, so I'll probably make it a little bit smaller, but that's our profile. I'm taking a few minutes and got my profile more or less like I want it. Not quite happy with the handle, but we're gonna put some scales on it, and maybe that'll make me feel better. I'm using my vise and these couple pieces of big thick metal here to hold my knife in. Hopefully that's going to be a heat sink, and so we're not going to heat up the blade. And I'm going to keep my finger down here on the blade, so I'll make sure I'm not heating the blade up. But I do want to take out the hardness out of this handle area here, and I'm just going to use my little propane torch to do that. And we're just going to heat this up to red heat and let it cool slowly, and try to take out some of that hardness so we can drill holes for this handle. Getting a little heat in my handle, so I'm going to use a little damp rag. But it was starting to get warm. These big blocks of metal was getting warm. And that's the way I take the hardness out of this handle. I don't want to quench that handle. I'm not trying to get that handle wet at all, but I am trying to knock some of this heat out of these big blocks of steel. And of course on the actual blade itself. But I think that's got it done. We'll just let that sit there and cool off naturally, and be in good shape. Alright, we've got our pattern and our knife back together. We've just been comparing the handle. Our blade is a little more curved than our pattern, but I think it'll be alright. It's a little longer than our pattern, and I like to do that because when we sharpen this, it may shorten it a little bit, so we leave it a little bit long. But we've got our pattern handle felt pretty good, and we've got this one to where it's the same dimensions, pretty close. So we got that pretty close to being exactly the same. This thinner blade here, it feels rough in the hand, and that's why I like to make a thicker pattern, because that gives you more of a feel of what your knife will feel like. This is still probably feels a little bit big to me, but our scales won't be but about twice that thick, so pretty good estimation, and we can always make it a little smaller, hard to make it bigger. So but with a real thin blade like this, when you hold it in your hand, this one still feels pretty rough, but it's because of the thickness, because this is the exact same shape and this feels a lot better. We got to set up and drill our holes. We have annealed this where we heated up the handle, and so hopefully this will drill pretty easy. I'm just going to keep this handle pretty simple. We're just going to put 2 pins in it, and I'm going to put the first pin right about there, and the second pin right about there, and we're going to look at that, make sure we like that, and make sure it looks like it's in the center. And the trick with this is, if it looks right, it is right. If it looks off, it doesn't look correct, it's not going to be correct. Now you can do all kind of fancy measuring and every kind of thing, but like I say, if it looks right, it is right. This one needs to come over this way just a hair. Take these glasses off. That one looks pretty close. Alright, so that's what we're going to shoot for. We'll center punch those. The way you set up your drill press is critical. If this drill bit gets seized in this metal, the metal's going to want to spin. This knife is not sharp, like a sharp edge yet, but it does have a sharp point on it. And I always put the longest side, and this is how you work this. Whatever piece of metal, even if it's not a knife, put the longest side out to the left. The drill bit spins clockwise. If it gets hung and comes out of our clamp, which we've got it clamped, it will hit the post back here and not spin around and cut us across our midsection here. So it's critical. I saw a gentleman doing this on the internet the other day, and it cut the fool out of him. He had the long part sticking out on this side, and it hit him in the hand instead of in his stomach, but it certainly can do much damage to you. And all I have is an inexpensive machinist type vise that allows me to go in and out and back and forward attached to my drill press. And so that's how I set up my drill press, and that it holds it good. And I've got a piece of wood underneath this. It holds it in here good, and I can do fine-tune adjustments with it. Alright, now we got our drill bit set up. We'll put us a little bit of oil on it and on our drill bit. Drill our hole. since we have annealed, our steel on this handle end, drill real nice. We've got a brand new sharp bit, put a little oil on it, got us a center punch, all that stuff helps. Alright, we've got our blade set up here. I think I'm going to put in the bevels with a file. Since this is such a thin blade, I think I'm going to err on the side of caution here and just put in the bevels with a file. Alright, so that's what we got. And I'm just going to take it over to our finishing sander and just vibrating sander and just sand it a little bit, get some of the big scratches out of it. See what it looks like. Alright. Got a piece of cherry here, and I think that's going to be plenty wide enough to get us our handle blanks. And it's burnt a little bit where I cut it on the table saw, but other than that, it's alright. And it is, I don't know if you can see it, I'm standing in the sunshine. It is got some red in it, but it's got some white too, so we're going to try to take advantage of our colors. And so we're going to trace us out a couple of blanks and see what we can get done with that. Alright, we got our very rough blanks, our handle laid out, cut out, and what I do is I just want to make sure we got enough meat around this thing to cover our metal up for certain on both pieces, which we do. And these pieces of wood are tapered, thicker at the top, skinnier at the bottom. Saves me a lot of sanding because that's the way I like my handles. And they've got a good side and a bad side. This is obviously the bad side, but we're going to sand these up a little bit and get rid of some of the lumpy bumpy parts and drill us some holes. When I drill the holes through this, that's when I'll go back and I'll trace around this real good, and we'll start and we'll put both pieces together and we'll sand it as a unit there, as a matched pair. But I think that's going to look alright. We're going to have a surrounded something up here, mainly because of these points. Whenever you run something out to a point, the grain of your wood is short there, so if you don't make it round towards the front, you've got a really short grain. If you round it this way, then you've got virtually no length in your grain at all. So if you round it out a little bit fatter in the front, it gives you a little more strength. It still could chip off, but we're gonna do what we can to make it not. And I think that'll add a little something to it. We'll dish that part out too. It'll be round in the front and dished out, and then this dish back this way, and then a palm swell, and then taper off to the end. And I'm still not, I don't know if I'm gonna keep that part or not, and I'm certainly gonna round these a little bit once I get my handle together. I'll just knock the points off of that because that's too sharp for any reasonable purpose. But there we are at that point. Alright, I got my handles roughed out. They're pretty burnt where my table saw wasn't wanting to cut this cherry very much. I'm going to sand this up so we can get a good look at their pattern, so we can see if we want to go this way or this way. I've sharpened our blade up and polished it to about 600 grit, and we've got a razor sharp, but we're going to protect that, fold that in some paper, put some tape around it, and then we'll drill our holes once we get our handles prepped. Alright, what we've got here is a choice. We can put it on where it's this side and this side, or we can put it on where it's this side and this side, and I think that's what I'm going to do. It's showing a little of the sapwood on both sides. This one's got a little more on it. Alright, we've got our handle profiled for the most part. Fits. We put it actually on our knife and used our belt grinder to just profile it. I've rounded the front of it, the front edge of it, like I want, and it's rough right now. And then I went back through and I put some lines around this just by doing a little pencil trick where you hold your finger against the wood and hold the pencil and draw it. So that's all. Those are reference lines, so when I start knocking the corners off, I can kind of keep them even. You don't have to do that, but it does help to kind of keep you even. Particularly up here, I'm going to knock it back a little farther than, and I'd like them to be even on both sides. And we got our pins so they're lining up good, and we can put this on and off of our handle. Now when we've used our belt grinder to do our rough profile, it's raised a burr on our knife steel here. So we're going to knock that down with just some sandpaper. And notice I have protected my edge and protected me from the edge because it's pretty sharp at this point. Just some paper towels and a little electrical tape. So we're going to start with this burr here. And just check to make sure that we got most of it. Yeah, it feels a lot better. And I'm not trying to change the shape at all. I'm just trying to keep from cutting myself, basically. That burr, when you raise those burrs, they will cut you. Alright, so we're going to set up and we're going to work on the front of this handle to start with. And then we'll knock off these corners. and put it back on the knife and see how it feels, see what else we need to do. But we're getting pretty close to gluing it on. Alright, all I've done is taken those just straight across at a bevel, a chamfer, and it's not quite connected to lines. I left the lines on there. I can always take some more off. I can't put it back, so we're doing this slowly. And so now we can put our handle together. We can feel it. We can put it with our blade steel in the middle of it here. So you feel the width of it. We can put our pins back in it, take a really good look at it, see if that's what we're liking. And then the next step is just knocking off these corners. And when you knock those corners off, your lines will disappear. And I did this portion with the belt grinder. Certainly didn't have to do. They could have done it with a file, easy enough. But I'll do the next rounding part with the vibrating sander, just a half sheet sander, and it's just a little slower. It doesn't go as fast, so you can control it a little bit better. And the idea is to make both sides even. Once I get this rounded, I may come back in here, and a lot of times I'll dish out a little bit in here, and thin this down back here a little bit, so the center of this is not flat. It's a hump here in the center, and that kind of fits into your palm of your hand. But this is feeling pretty good at this moment. Shouldn't take much more to get it the way I like it. And then we'll glue it up, and we'll wait to do our final sanding with the glue up. Alright, we just knocked off those corners, so it's round now, or more or less round. We've gotten rid of most of the marks, not all of them. This is just our rough sanding of our handle before we glue it on. Once you glue it on, you may have to sand it some more, or you should have to sand it some more, because your glue may squeeze out, your epoxy. So what I do at this point is I put it back together, and sit and hold it a while. I sit and hold it a whole lot when I make one, so that I'm happy with the handle, the way the handle is. If it's needing something, I want to do it at the appropriate time, which is now. And let me put this through. And sometimes your pins will go through one direction easier than they will the other. And sometimes you have to push down on them with the table a little bit. But either way, that'll work. And so that's what we've got at the moment. It's looking pretty good, feeling pretty good. Again, once I glue it on, we may dish this out. I probably will dish this out and taper this back just a little bit, but that'll be with the pins and everything in it, so we'll wait to do that. But we're basically ready to glue this on. And before I glue it on, I am going to go sit and hold it a while. Go watch some TV and hang on to it, see if I like that shape. I can change every bit of it at this point. It's not glued on. I can do new scales. I could change the profile. I can make them thinner. I could add, if they're not thick enough, you can add spacers in between them, make them thicker. So I mean, it's lots that you can do to fix errors, but once you glue them on, you're pretty much stuck with what you got. Got our knife handle sanded up really good. We're going to take just a little bit. And what I sanded the last was this edge with them together, and I got that to 600 grit. When you do that, it may give you a little burr on the inside, kind of like the metal. That's all I'm doing is knocking that little burr off. And we're going to get our clamps set up here so that they're in the right spot, at least a couple of them to get going here. Get it going on these clamps. So we're gonna, and we've got our fingernail polish remover. What we're gonna be using today is 5-minute epoxy. I just bought this at our big box store. You can get it online. Lots of different versions of this. This one is DEVCON. Home, it says. And you don't use a lot of this. This was relatively expensive, maybe like $25 for these 2 bottles, but I've had it for a while now. And you got to keep it where it don't freeze, so that's the main thing with that. In our fingernail polish remover, which is what this bottle is, but what's in it is acetone, which is the same idea as fingernail polish remover, but that's what cleans it up. So you got to be ready to clean this up. This doesn't give you a lot of time to fumble around looking for your stuff, so you need to get this together. And we got a couple paper towels ready, and so we're going to disassemble our pieces. Get the dirt out of it. And what I'm trying to do is get an equal part, about as big as a quarter is what I generally go for with a knife handle. Make sure you put the right caps on the right bottle or you're going to have problems. We want an equal size. Spots there. And what I use to apply it is nothing but a wooden skewer that I bought at the grocery store. And I flattened an end with a knife, just made it like a little popsicle stick end, and it's got a pointy end on this end if I need to get something real specific. But I take those 2 things and I'm going to mix these together. I'm going to make sure not to get it on my stuff before I get it mixed together here. And we want to take our time and get this good, because it's only one shot at this to mix it. Nope, I'm not there just yet. Alright, we're going to call that close enough. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to control where this goes. I'm going to run a little bit down the holes. Try not to get it all over. I'm trying to keep it in the middle because when we put our clamps on, it's going to squish out. And we want to keep it off of this front edge. And we want to make it smooth down pretty good. That front edge I've already got sanded up, so we don't want to mess that up. So now we're going to get us a little bit on here. And again, I'm just going to stick it in the hole. And that hole a little bit. And this hole a little bit. And then I'm going to stick my pin through this direction. In that direction. I'm just getting these started. Stick our knife on this thing. Get our pin started through. I'm just getting up. I'm going to poke it down in the hole again a little bit. And this hole a little bit. And you don't have to get crazy with this. I see some of the folks going just crazy with this stuff. This is going to work. It don't take much. And like I say, once we put our clamps on there, it's going to want to squish out. So we want to control that some. I'm going to start our portion. Push our pins through. Alright, like that. And get this out of the way. I'm just going to do a initial. Wipe this all off around the edges mainly. And around our pins, they poke through. And then we're just going to put our clamps on. Just look at it to make sure we're looks pretty good, and we'll take off any excess that you can get to. The more you clean up at this point, the less you'll have to sand off. So I don't like sanding too much. I'm gonna clean it up. just looking at our seam here, make sure we're looking pretty tight. So we'll have big gaps in it. That's about it. All I'm gonna do is let it dry now. Alright, got it out the clamps, and I went ahead and used my belt grinder, and I knocked off the little pieces that were sticking out. I cut them off close as I could, but knocked them off with the belt grinder. And I did put in a little bit of a finger well, or whatever you want to call it, right here, so that your swell is here, and I tapered the end just slightly. Hard to see that on the camera, I guess probably right there, but you can see it's fat here and it swells out and it tapers back. And it's still blocky looking right now, so I'm going to take a few minutes and use our vibrating sander. We're going to put some 100 grit on there, and we're going to round over all the corners where I did these grinding in here and tapering. It's left me sharp corners again. So, and then we'll dress up our hole here. We'll just take a little piece of sandpaper and run down in there. But it's feeling pretty good. It's about the right size. You got a little room, but I left a little room, and I like this part here so I can put my thumb up here. When I'm using a fillet knife, I want to, especially like taking the skin off of one, I like to be able to put my thumb there instead of holding it like that. You're in the way. So if you put your thumb there, you're a little better off. Alright, that's kind of what we got at this point. And at this point, I generally go ahead and hand sand what's remaining. It's usually up in the little tight places that need some work. And since we ground that off, I'll sand up in this hole just slightly. But we're almost there. I see a little hand sanding left. Put a little finish on this. Now we're gonna go up grits on our vibrating sander, but it ain't no point. Once you've seen me do that one time with one grit, it's back the same. But this is 100. We'll do 150, 220, 400, 600, and before we put our finish on. And like I said, we'll hand sand these little Sharpie parts that we can't get with the sander at that point. But it's feeling real good. Feeling like we had a good purchase on it, and so that's what we'll do. Alright, there's our handle, sanded up to 400 grit, and it feels really smooth and really soft and good for finish. So I think we're gonna take it inside and hold it a while, make sure we're liking that before we put our finish on it. Alright, we're back. We got our handle sanded all up, sanded it to 400 grit. You could keep going, that'd be fine too, but that's enough. And we got some walnut oil. I just buy this at my grocery store, and it's in where they keep all the other oil. And I use this on all my knives because it's a food safe finish. You can put it on your salad too. I haven't done that. That's what they sell it for. But we're going to see what kind of grain we got on this jewel. This side in particular, I think, is going to have really nice grain. If I can see all of the swirlies in that, but that's pretty nice. And so put the walnut oil on it. And now what I have in this little container that's fast cooling off is a little beeswax that I melted. And it also has a little olive oil in it. I'm about out of it. I'll make some, I'll video that. But it's basically just beeswax, just pure beeswax and olive oil, 50-50 ratio. And what that'll do is when that dries, it'll harden onto our wood here. When the beeswax dries, it's at room temperature. It seals. And so that's what we're after. Just want to make sure it's everywhere, all the little parts and creases and everything, and around the blade. And what I like about this finish is, if you get it on the blade, it don't really matter. It don't hurt nothing. You can wipe it right off. You can reapply this at any point in the future. You don't have to sand it or anything. You just go ahead and do it. And it needs that. Of course, it's not dishwasher safe or any of that kind of stuff. Neither is the blade. It's high carbon steel. It's not stainless. So keep my knives out of the dishwasher. But that's what we got. And we'll let that cure. We'll let that set up till it's room temperature. And then we'll buff it a little bit, and we'll bring out the shine in it. And so, being outside today and it's cool, that beeswax cools off fast. Let's make sure we're in the picture here. And so that's our knife. And so we're ready to make a sheath, and we'll show a video of that process too. This is a bigger knife than I have shown making a sheath for before. And it's alright if you take some of your beeswax cloth and run that on your blade. That helps keep it from rusting. Kind of gives it a little protection. Alright, we've got our knife completed. We've sharpened it some. It will certainly cut you. It's very flexible, as you can see, so we can fillet anything we want. It follows right along the bones. It's got a cherry handle. We've finished the blade to 800 grit and the handle to 400 grit sandpaper. We put on a walnut and beeswax food safe finish, and we've got her pretty good. I hope y'all have enjoyed that video. I hope that you'll check us out at Esty and at the VSTA, Virginia School of Traditional Arts website. We're offering classes, kind of this time of year with the COVID thing. We're offering small classes, so if you've got one or two people that's already in your circle, your family, what you work with, and y'all want to have a class on knife making or sheath work or wood turning or any of those type of things, just give us a call and we'll set something up for you. Hope that you'll hit the like and subscribe button for us. That helps us out. Share this with your friends. And this is how to make a fillet knife.